Welcome back to the Explanation Pro. Today I'll recap an adventure, drama film based on the true story of a May 1936 attempt on the Eiger by four climbers called North Face. Spoilers incoming. Sometime in post-war New York, novice journalist Louise Fellner is browsing through a journal full of postcards, photos, and entries detailing the experience of her friends Tony Kurz and Andy Hinterstoicer on the summit of the Eiger, a mountain of the Bernese Alps overlooking Switzerland. She recalls Tony's last words to her and the events leading to that expedition as she closes the journal. It is May 1936 in Nazi-occupied Germany. Louise watches a documentary film playing in a cinema. It explains that in 1935, two young German climbers from Bavaria, Karl Maringer and Max Sedlmayr, attempted to ascend the north face of the Eiger. Weeks later, the German World War I ace Ernst Udet searched for the missing men with his aircraft, eventually spotting one of them frozen to death in what became known as the Death Bivouac. Canton Byrne later banned the climbing of the Eiger north face in the wake of the tragedy. After the movie, she shows interest in a window display of some new Kodak cameras, as her passion is photography. At the Berliner Zeitung newsroom, Louise works as a secretary for editor Henry Arau. At the moment, the news about the Eiger expeditions has been widespread all over the Reich. Hence, every writer and editor is present at a meeting to discuss when German climbers will take their first ascent to reach Olympic gold. A suggestion floats in the room to enlist climbers Kurz and Hinterstoicer from the Mountain Brigade for the dangerous endeavor. It just so happens that Louise is childhood friends with the men from Berchtesgaden, Bavaria, so she talks about them to the editors, only to be laughed at. Though feeling a bit embarrassed, she continues to perform her duties serving coffee to Henry and another editor as they talk about her friends. The former then gives her money for travel expenses to Berchtesgaden to entice them to climb the Eiger, as this is an incredible media opportunity. Meanwhile, at the armed forces in Berchtesgaden, Kurz and Hinterstoicer are recruits doing hard labor in the latrines. Later at night, the men prepare all their gear for another amateur ascent on another mountain somewhere in the Alps. By daytime, they scale upward and enjoy the thrill of being above everything else. Hinterstoicer hammers the metal bolt in place and swings with all his might as Kurz watches in awe of his friend. Suddenly, the bolt detaches from the cliff, and Hinterstoicer almost falls, only to hold onto another ledge. Relieved, his friend pulls him up, and together, they reach the rocky summit, completing what they call the Hinterstoicer-Kurz route, as they document their success in the journal. As they rest, Hinterstoicer feels jealous of fellow climbers Willy Angerer and Eddie Rayner, who recently made news ascending at the Eiger. He begs Kurz to take on the challenge to prove themselves better, but he wishes to think about it more. The men return home when Kurz's mother informs her of a guest looking for them. They are surprised and thrilled to see Louise after a long time, especially Kurz, who has been romantically involved with her. She reveals her new job as a journalist in Berlin, though she is not proud of doing menial tasks rather than actual fieldwork. The men invite her to a local pub, where they enjoy drinking beer and dancing with Nazi party officials. They take a break and wind down as they talk about each other's lives. She then discloses that her newspaper company is interested in seeing them climb the Eiger soon, along with the Austrians, who already have a head start. She tries to convince them to take the challenge so that she can write the article with the headline, "Berchtesgaden Heroes Conquer Last Problem of the Alps." Kurz seemingly backs out from her gets in light of the terrible fate climbers Maringer and Sedlmayr ended up with, fearing their lives will also be at risk should they attempt to do the same thing. He leaves abruptly, but Louise chases him out and begs him to reconsider so that she has something to be proud of. He insists she finds someone else, partly because he was heartbroken when she left him to pursue her career. The following day, while in the middle of some training exercises, Hinterstoicer regrets not accepting the offer for the Eiger ascent. He wishes for him and Kurz to prove they are the best at what they do, though his friend is more concerned about the dangers of the climb since it is just a hobby to him. Meanwhile, at the newsroom, Louise disappointingly returns to Henry, bearing news about her friend's refusal. Alternatively, her boss informs her he will visit the Austrians, Angerer, and Rayner instead and put them in the paper. At the base, Hinterstoicer requests a special leave of absence from his duties to pursue the expedition. He is immediately denied by the company sergeant until Kurz arrives in his defense, saying he will get married soon and his friend is the best man. Ultimately, they quit the service, being more interested in mountaineering than politics, a move that stunned Hinterstoicer. Later at home, they prepare all the tools they need for the challenging climb, as this is unlike any other mountain they will face. In the Red Room, Louise is developing her photographs when Henry visits, looking astonished with her work so far. He decides to let her come with him to Switzerland on a train scaling the Alps. She and the train passengers look in awe at the north face of the Eiger as they reach clean Skydeg Middle Station. Later, she and her boss settle in a luxurious Swiss hotel overlooking the mountainside. At the same time, the two climbers are on the way to the base of the Eiger by bike, since they have no funds for travel. They make camp near the ridge where other mountaineers are set up. Coincidentally, they are nearby the Swiss hotel where Louise is staying. Later in the evening, Henry invites her to a fancy dinner with some colleagues as they talk about news on the Eiger climb, believing it will inspire German soldiers who are fighting in the war. He is proud that they will publish articles with incredible pictures that Louise will take soon. Simultaneously, Kurz and Hinterstoisser spend the night eating some food with Austrians, Angerer, and Rainer as they are hoping for Nazi-led incorporation of Austria into Germany. The following day, July 15th, Louise and Henry take another train ride as they ascend to 3,000 meters above sea level. Below them, the two Bavarian climbers plan their ascent and note areas where they can stash emergency gear should they get stuck along the way. Finally, at Eigerwand Station, the tourists, including Henry and Louise, take a good look at the view and the sharp drop from below. She begins to take pictures as the rest talk in awe of the beautiful natural landscape. A little while after the passengers climb aboard the train, Louise continues photographing when Henry saves her from stumbling from the metal railing. While they wait for another train, they are invited by the station manager to rest up in his quarters. He talks about the legend of the ogre, who lives in the mountains and devours anyone that climbs to the top, hence the name Eiger. Another day passes, and the Bavarians are close to the gallery window of the mountain. The weather is foggy, and the terrain is much too rocky as they slowly trek higher and higher to a safe spot. They set up the metal pitons and latch a long rope line on the carabiners to secure their climb and descent. On the way, they meet competing mountaineers who insult them for being too slow. Below them, competing French and Italian climbers assess the conditions and decide to abort their attempt. Eventually, the pair cross paths again with Louise, who looks utterly surprised that they went on the expedition anyway. Henry is ecstatic and invites the men, including the Austrian climbers, for dinner back in the hotel to share their experience so far. Louise proposes a toast to their success and that they go back from the mountain safely. She continues to happily talk about childhood memories with them to Henry, much to Kurz's consternation, feeling jealous of the editor. After a while, he excuses himself to leave, making Louise feel guilty about the time she left him. She forces herself to enjoy the party, drinking while Henry plays a ditty on the piano. Back at the tent, Kurz retires in the middle of a heavy storm while his friend remains in the hotel a while longer. The following night, he goes back to the hotel and checks the logbook for the room Louise is staying at. As soon as he sees her, he gives her his journal for her to keep while they attempt the trek to the north face. She kisses him passionately, bringing back old feelings that rekindle their relationship. As soon as he returns to the campsite, he and Hinterstoisser secretly start packing their gear to get ahead of the competition towards the top. They get high enough to see the nearby town in the distance, and soon enough, they will reach the icy terrain long before the other mountaineers start climbing. Unfortunately, Hinterstoisser discovers they forget their traction devices, making it harder for them to hold on to snow, so they try to cut through more rocky terrain instead. Later, as Kurz hammers in the piton, rocks fall from the cliff and hit one of the rival mountaineers in the eye. They blame the pair who ask them not to follow their route to avoid accidentally falling debris. Meanwhile, Henry busies himself with updating the editors in the newsroom via phone calls about the expedition. Louise then takes pictures of the onlookers eagerly using binoculars and telescopes to see how the competition is going. Henry grabs one of the telescopes and pays close attention to one of the Austrians who is not well clothed for the extreme conditions waiting for them at the top. Later, the mountaineers are looking for better ways to traverse the Sedlmayr route. The pair make it across a broad ridge with the tension traverse, which everyone sees except Louise, who is busy putting film in the camera. Later, the Bavarian duo decides to bring the whole rope with them instead of leaving a line for emergencies. More than halfway to the summit, Hinterstoisser declares they will beat the Austrians by the next day. They have a hard time sleeping due to the intense cold weather. Back at the hotel, a celebration occurs, and guests eat a giant cake shaped like the Eiger. They eventually reach the first ice field and manage the terrain with ice picks. By nightfall, they camp out in the first bivouac 100 m above. By July 19th, the mountaineers are much closer to the second ice field, but the Austrians slow it down due to the injury Angerer suffered days earlier. From the hotel, Henry observes he is growing weaker by the minute. Later, the Bavarian duo reaches a point in the mountain where they discover the dead bodies and belongings of their fellow German climbers. They say a prayer for them and slide them down the slope to be buried below. The teams then join forces in climbing, as the weather gets colder. Hours pass and it is clear to everyone that Angerer is no longer in the right condition to advance further. Despite this, the Austrians keep climbing, reaching 3,350 m. However, Rainer loses his foothold and slips, forcing everyone to pull down from the rope while Anderer breaks his leg. They descend and help him with a tourniquet to stop the bleeding. Rainer tells the Bavarians he will lift his partner back to camp, despite them arguing whether it is a good idea to do so. A delirious Angerer insists they must continue, and so later at night, they make it to the second bivouac. At the hotel dining area, Henry receives an urgent phone call aborting their quest for the North Face competition story, as he feels the climbers are just not adequate to make it to the summit. On the following day, Louise watches below as a fierce snowstorm slows down the descent of the mountaineers. Later, after an evening at the lounge with Henry, she wastes no time and heads out in the cold to Eigerwan station. She alerts the station manager about the mountaineers stuck near the road flow, so he takes her to another gallery window for her to reach out to the men. Kurz and Hinterstoisser feel relieved to see her from the other side, that they become more determined to descend to safety. Around 10:30 a.m., they are now 823 m from the ground. Kurz remembers that the emergency rope to help them climb down has already been used, so they use the tension traverse method, which does not go well as Hinterstoisser gets stuck and freezes. Meanwhile, Henry berates hotel staff for letting Louise leave in the middle of the snowstorm. He follows her to the station and begs her to return to safety, but she refuses, intending to rescue her friends. Later, the mountaineers descend even further as they run out of supplies. Suddenly, a rock slide falls from the gully and kills Rainer. Realizing that he and Angerer are acting as dead weight to Kurz, Hinterstoisser makes the difficult decision of cutting the rope and plunging to his death. Kurz is in shock, now the only one left alive. He calls out to Louise for a rescue team, so she and the station manager head back to the hotel and beg the other climbers to save him. Fortunately, some agree and make a harrowing trek from the gallery window towards Kurz by evening, but the storm is too intense for them to continue. As they return to Louise, they hear Kurz scream for help, wishing not to die alone on the North Face. By 9 p.m., Louise checks on him, assuring him she will be there to wait out the storm with him. The next day, the weather is clear enough for the rescue time to recover a frail Kurz dangling from the mountainside with one piton left. The guides cannot pass an unclimbable overhang that separates them from Kurz, but they get a rope long enough to reach him by tying two ropes together. While abseiling, however, he does not get the knot to pass through his carabiner. He then begins to lose consciousness as he hangs from his position. The mountaineers know it is too late, so they help steady Louise with a rope as she tries to jump across the cliffside to Kurz and talk to him. As the weak and frostbitten climber takes one last look at Louise, shouting from above to grab the rope, he dies. The recovery team retrieves Tony's body from the mountain in the evening. Louise, still in shock, sits alone on the train when Henry comes in to check on her. He apologizes for his words the other night and assures her that the men will be significantly honored by the Germans. He offers to take her back to Berlin, but she refuses, feeling tired of his cynical nature and wanting to start anew somewhere else. As he leaves defeated, the train departs. Back in New York, she is now a full-time professional photographer. She feels grateful for being spared on the mountain, but she will forever grieve the loss of her best friends, especially Tony, whose love kept her alive to this day. She smokes on the rooftop as she looks at the horizon, thinking about her life from now on. It is revealed that the North Face was first climbed on July 24, 1938, by Anderl Heckmair, Ludwig Vorg, Heinrich Harrer, and Fritz Kasparek in a German-Austrian party. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and also subscribe my channel for more videos like this. See you in the next video.